Hello to all the viewers out there. I would like to welcome you to another edition of the 4J Brothers podcast. On tap for tonight is the topic of racism being addressed in poems as well as songs. Specifically, we will break down 5 literary devices that we found in each song or poem and describe how the poetic device contributes to the song or poem's overall message.
Thank you, Christian, for that great introduction. With that being said, let's get right into it. For our viewers out there that may have not heard about The Caged Bird by Maya Angelou, it is basically about how a caged bird doesn't give up and keeps trying to break free, while the free bird doesn't come across many challenges.
The first poetic device in this poem is metaphor, and it is one of the best that I have ever seen, Tim.
Oh really? How so?
Well, the caged bird and the free bird are both examples that the whole poem is based upon. In my opinion, this metaphor of the caged bird to person of color makes this poem so powerful and strong. The second poetic device, which is alliteration, refers to the repetition of consonant sounds in the same line. The use of alliteration is shown in Seldom See, line 10. The third poetic device is symbolism, and symbolism is a device used when an object is used to represent an idea in the poem. The caged bird is used to represent the black community in America. The word cage represents the subjugation of the blacks in the segregated community, while the free bird refers to the whites who are allowed to live anywhere, have prominent jobs, and live without any form of discrimination. Finally, we see end rhyme in the following lines. But longed for still, and his tune is heard on the distant hill for the caged bird. Then we see it in the end rhyme is still and hill and heard and bird. Finally, we got personification, which is the last one from this Maya Angelou poem, and it is used exquisitely in this poem. An example of this is Sighing of the Trees in line 24.
That would be pretty funny if they were sighing trees. Our next topic, Don't Drag Me Down, examines the influence of society, including those closest to us, creating and perpetuating hate and racism.
Ignorance, like a gun in hand, is an obvious example of illusion. In this case, being ignorant does not actually mean having a gun in hand. It just means that if you're being ignorant, you're being silly. Next is metaphor, which we see an example of. Painted black, used at the end of the song, is not meant to be taken serious, that they will make the White House black. It is just proving that people of color are feeling left out in society. For this first time this podcast, we have simile, which is a figure of speech involving the comparison of one thing with another thing, used to make a description more emphatic. In this case, we have ignorance like a gun in hand. Therefore, we have to see that this simile was created because they feel as if not doing anything about the issue is making things a lot worse. The fourth poetic device is your history books are full of lies. Media blitz is going to cover your eyes is an example of end rhyme, and we can see that with lies and eyes. And that brings forth the issue, which is if what our ancestors have done was wrong, and now we are following in those footsteps, then we will never create change. Last but not least, we have juxtaposition, which is used in line 3, where it states, some are rich and some are poor. This brings to the forefront the dramatic difference in the amount of money that is being perceived made by people of color compared to others during this time period.
A little context about this song is If I Can Dream was produced just 2 months after the murder of Dr. Martin Luther King, and it has a lot of similarities with MLK's historic I Have a Dream speech.
The first poetic device is personification, which is found in line 8, where Elvis sings, strong winds of promise that will blow away the doubt and fear. This is a premier example because it is giving the wind a human-like characteristic, and we all know that the wind doesn't have fear. If I can dream of a warmer sun, where hope keeps shining on everyone, tell me why, oh why, oh why, won't that sun appear? Elvis Presley does such a great job using the sun and it shining on us that it paints such a clear picture in my mind of the sunbeams of hope are hitting me. Therefore, this is an example of imagery. The third poetic device is found in lines 3 and 4, and we see the use of end rhyme. The song goes, "If I can dream of a better land where all my brothers walk in hand." I would like to point out that land and hand are the two that make it an end rhyme.
Christian, I found in this song where there are a lot of examples of a word or phrase that is applied to an object or action in which it does not literally apply.
Yes, Tim, that is a very good observation. Metaphor is a commonly used poetic device in this song. An example of this is, "We're lost in a cloud." Sometimes we can get caught up in all the chaos that is going on, with all the craziness that has been going on the last few years. With George Floyd, for example, it is helpful to take a step back so we can fully digest what is going on. The fifth and final poetic device that I've chosen is repetition. "If I Can Dream" by Elvis Presley has many great uses of poetic devices, but it is the way in which repetition is used that separates it from the rest. The first example is, "And while I can think, while I can talk, while I can stand, while I can walk, while I can dream." And then he goes on to say, "Oh, please let my dream come true. Oh, right now, if I can dream, let it come true, right now. Oh yeah, if I can dream, let it come true, right now." Tim, I'm going to be honest with you. This is the best use of repetition. The first part comes down to if you can think, talk, stand, walk, then you are able to do anything. Since we know this song had to do with MLK, this is the sort of motto that he would have lived by so that he could make a difference in history. The second part is if you have a dream and you shoot your shot over and over and over, something is going to stick, which for all we know could possibly be the end to racism.
Stevie Wonder, Black Man. This song goes through a bunch of different colors of people that have had a hand in making our world a better place, and it shows us that we should all have equal rights.
The first poetic device is hyperbole. An example is, "But as your hand touches your heart." Obviously, this is dramatic and impossible, but this is showing us what it would mean if we truly cared for change. The second poetic device is imagery. We pledge allegiance all our lives to the magic colors red, blue, and white. The use of imagery here goes to show how absurd it is that we are not treating the people of our own country who live and do the same stuff we do equally. Guide of a ship on the first Columbus trip was a brown man. This is ironic because if anyone should have more claim over the land, it should have been brown people because they were the discoverers of the land. The fourth poetic device is repetition. A bit of a longer example of repetition used in Black Man is, "This world was made for all men. This world was made for all men. This world was made for all men. God saved his world for all men. All people, all babies, all children, all colors, all races. This world's for you and me. This world's my world, your world, everybody's world. This world, their world, our world. This world was made for all men." The fifth poetic device, for a second time in a row, is repetition that I found was most effective in getting the message across. An example of this is the backbone of the song, is "For the flag we now hold high" was a black man. On the first Columbus trip was a brown man. Heart surgery was first done successfully by a black man. Farm workers' rights were lifted to new heights by a brown man. In this piece of work, there's not just one part that I can pick above the rest, because each line sets up the next. As it comes to equality, these are all prime examples of things that we might not have if it wasn't for people of color. I believe that one of the first ways to fix a problem is to identify what is going wrong, and for some people, it may be recognizing how important and crucial different groups are to our lives, whether it is race or gender or anything else.
Finally, we have Rosa Parks by Rita Duff. If I am being honest, this is one of my favorite poems I have read because of the historical significance of it. Rosa Parks one day decided to sit in a place on the bus where people of color were not allowed to sit. because she decided that she was going to take a stand against racism and stick up for what she believed in and her rights.
The first poetic device in Rosa Parks by Rita Dove I have is alliteration. And this is the occurrence of the same letter or sound at the beginning of closely connected words. For example, in Rosa Parks, Rita Dove states, "The clean flame of her gaze carved by a camera flash." I just want to outline the flame and the flash are the two that make this alliteration. In just so few words, like flame and flash, we can interpret so much. What I took from this was that if you want something to change, you're going to have to start a flame. What I mean by this is it won't always be easy to start change. Like Rosa had to risk her freedom and life just so that people of color could sit wherever they want on the bus. Finally, the flash in our day and age is the public eye. This means that some groups may have issues with what you are doing, while others may think you are some sort of god. But it always comes down to doing what you think is right, like Rosa did by standing her ground on the bus. Up next, my second poetic device is paradox. And this is something that directly contradicts what you are saying. An example of this in Rosa Parks is doing nothing was the doing. First, I want to say that if you know what Rosa Parks did, then you truly understand how powerful this is. Even though trying to wrap your head around the concept that when she was doing nothing but sit down, that was her statement. A really good recent example of this could be the marches all around America protesting against police violence towards people of color. But also, there are times when you see somebody getting picked on, for example, that is not good enough to just sit there. The action would be making them stop, however it is that happens. In fact, juxtaposition is similar to paradox because the two things that are being compared are unalike. Rita Dove uses this by saying, "It's dream of a bench." From what we know, the dream of a bench is not literally what is being applied here because of the scrutiny that Rosa Parks got at the time. Of course, now that we see these historic actions, we know how symbolic and important that stand was for people of color. Funny enough, looking back on it, maybe it was a dream bench.
Christian, are there any poetic devices that maybe some of your listeners haven't ever heard of?
In fact, Tim, it's funny that you bring this up because there is one that a few of our listeners may not have heard of. Enjambment is the word. Enjambment is when a line is cut off before its natural stopping point, which forces readers down to the next line, and the next. An example of this in Rita Dove come in the second line and third lines where Rita states, "The time right inside a place, so wrong it was ready." Finally, we have poetic device number 5. This last poetic device is allusion. This is an expression that's meant to call something specific to mind without directly stating it. This is used quite often throughout the poem as the poet refers to the actions of the civil rights activist Rosa Parks, for example. And I quote, "Doing nothing was the doing." When we know, that's what she is known for. In conclusion, I hope everyone learned something new today while listening to the weekly Forte Brothers podcast. One thing that was really interesting to me was that even in such a small poem, Rita Dove got such a strong message across, sort of like how Rosa Parks doing so little meant so much. Finally, my favorite usage of poetic devices has to be the repetition in "If I Can Dream" by Elvis Presley, because not only does it get the message across, but it motivates you to want to do better. With all that being said, we are running out of time for today's podcast, so I will hand it over to Tim.
I want to say a big thank you for having me. I've learned so much about racism in poems and in songs, and different unique poetic devices. Who knew what enjambment was? I certainly had no clue what it meant and how artists uses it in different songs and poems. As well, I have come to appreciate how impactful Rosa Parks was. Her quiet but imperative stand against racism has helped to build and create a better future. As always, it's a pleasure working with my brother, and once again, thanks for having me. Make sure, as always, to hit that subscribe button, like, and remember to share and add the big 5-star review.